We're gonna try this again because I recorded it so many times and I'm so tired of recording this same video. Okay, so look, I have already recorded this video. As a matter of fact, I've recorded this video like 3 times. But as I was editing this video, I noticed that there was a huge chunk of film missing from the middle of the video. I have no idea where it went. I don't know why I have been cursed in such a way, but I was so close to being finished editing this video, and it just wasn't to be. Welcome to my channel. I'm Fabre. This is Black Famous, where we review, critique, and love on all things Black media. We are going to be kicking off this series with one of my favorite movies of all time, 1999's Life. This is one of those movies that was always on in my childhood, always playing in the background at every family function. It's one of the funniest movies of all time, and so I'm really excited to talk about it with you guys today. So my first thought was to give you an entire detailed synopsis, a play-by-play of this whole whopping 108-minute movie. But as I was rewatching this movie and then editing it, I thought that, a much better use of my time was really exploring some of the things that I didn't notice upon my first rewatches. So I thought, why don't I just compile those things, the really interesting, engaging, thought-provoking elements that I clocked on my rewatch. So that's what we're doing. Here are 5 things that I noticed about this movie that made me go, Number 1, the context. Life was released in 1999, a year embedded in the war on drugs. Policies that were coined by Ronald Reagan were only perpetuated by every president who came after him, up to and including the sitting president at the time, Bill Just the Tip Clinton. Though there's no significant difference in the usage of illicit drugs between white and Black populations in the United States, Black people are far more likely to be arrested for drug-related or illicit crime. But wait, there's more. From 1998 to 2003, Black people had prison sentences 9.3% longer than their white counterparts for drug-related crimes. And that number only grew over time. Now, mass incarceration over minor or low-level drug offenses is nothing new. It's not new to us today, it's not new to us in 1999, and not even 10 or 12 years prior to that. But with the framing of this movie, it tells a pretty interesting story. Life was based in the year 1932, which is interesting for 2 reasons. 1932 was the last year of Prohibition in the United States, and it was also a year that was deeply entrenched in Jim Crow laws. And with this movie being based in Mississippi, there is a very interesting comparison between the war on drugs and the Jim Crow South and Prohibition. Now, for the record, I don't know if this was something that was intentional by the writers, but it is interesting to point out whether it is or isn't a deliberate choice. Number 2, the plot. So this is the part where I spoil this whole thing. Now, if you want to watch it, which I highly recommend, just go ahead and skip to part 3 for a slightly spoiler-free review. It will still be spoilers. There will still be spoilers, but it won't be as explicit as what I'm about to go over now. The movie opens in 1997, where we see a small funeral for 2 older inmates, Ray Gibson and Claude Banks. As 2 younger inmates begin interring their bodies, they ask Willie Long, one of the oldest surviving members of this prison, just a little bit about Ray and Claude. Who were they? What was their deal? What were they in for? That takes us to the year 1932, where a young, smooth-talking Ray Gibson meets an uptight, working stiff Claude Banks. And they meet at this club called Spanky's, which is a speakeasy in Harlem, New York. they immediately run into shenanigans, which leaves Claude looking like a well-dressed dungaroo and Ray having to speed talk their way to freedom. Now, Spinky decides to go ahead and let them go in exchange for running a little errand for him. Ray and Claude agree to go down to Mississippi to pick up some grade A premium hooch for Spinky, and in return their debts are paid. They pretty much make it down there with almost no incident, except for a situation with a pie. But outside of that, they make it down there with little to no incident. And to celebrate, they decide to go to a place called Under the Hill, which is like 1932 Bourbon Street in Mississippi. Once they get down there, they end up kind of getting screwed, right? Ray, because he ends up losing his daddy's watch in a rigged card game, and Claude in a more traditional sense of the word. There's a little bit of screwing to go around though, because the huckster who ends up stealing Ray's watch doesn't really make it that far out of the building before he gets hemmed up by resident Blue Lives Matter advocate Sheriff Pike. So Hancock, he ends up dead, and Sheriff Pike finds 2 Harlem natives that he can basically pin this whole thing on. So Ray and Claude are sentenced to life in prison for Winston Hancock's death, and they are shipped out to Camp 8, where we meet the rest of our gang. We've got Willie Long, our narrator, also Jangle Leg, Biscuit, Goldmouth, Radio. We've got the cook, whose name was Cookie. And the rest of the gang is also all here. So Ray and Claude try several different methods to escape. Well, really just 2. One, either Leroy Jenkinsing their way through the forest or through appeal. They're both unsuccessful. So we fast forward again to 1944, where we see Claude is running the prison baseball team, which is really the only luxury afforded to them. Right around this same time, a new inmate joins the prison. I don't think joins the prison is, you don't join a prison. He's sent to the prison. His name is Can't Get Right. And he is a nonverbal man. And he has a real talent for the game, a real gifted natural ability for it. This catches the eye of a roving talent scout for the Negro League, who is really interested in getting him to sign on with them. Ray and Claude make it pretty clear that the only way for Can't Get Right to really do well on the outside is for them to come with him, because they are his handlers, which gross, but that's what they say. Can't Get Right is released without them though, which leads to this huge blow up between the 2 of them, and they end up not speaking for 30 years. That's a long grudge. They do end up rekindling their friendship though, after like 30 years, when Claude snaps and just like steals a pie, which kind of goes back to like there was a pie situation earlier. Not super important. There's a pie, he takes it, he's eating it, he's being punished for it. The infinite wisdom of Andy the Overseer, I don't know his name, that is what I named him. He decides to try to get Ray to participate in Claude's punishment. Ray refuses, and therefore he gets punished as well. But they're friends again. Now both comfortably in their 60s, Ray and Claude are sent to work at the superintendent's mansion. It's a bit of a weird dichotomy there. You've got Ray outside doing the lawn work and Claude inside being a butler of sorts. I don't know. I feel the slave vibes. If you don't, I don't know what to tell you there. Mr. Wilkins, the superintendent, and Claude actually end up getting along pretty well, with the exception of like one really tense conversation where Claude makes it very clear that he is an innocent man, and it's met with Mr. Wilkins's like benevolent confusion. And oh, also, because I forgot to mention, Mr. Wilkins has this vague and annoying illness that will come around it loops back, which is the only reason why I'm mentioning it. He has this vague illness. It makes him want to go ahead and retire pretty soon. So just remember that, because it's going to be important later. So due to Mr. Wilkins's advanced age and then also his stupid vague illness, okay, that changed the battery. Okay, let's get back into it. They are in the market for a new superintendent at Camp 8. Claude chauffeurs Mr. Wilkins to the bus station to pick up the new superintendent. This is Claude's first time out of the prison in like 40 years. And a lot has changed in that time. He sees different styles of dress, he hears different music, he sees black children and white children just eating ice cream together, and he sees himself and how much he has changed and how much he has aged over the years. It's a very poignant moment. He's taking some time, taking stock of his life. So imagine his surprise when who comes out of the Greyhound bus station but Sheriff Pike. Sheriff Pike is going to be the new superintendent. So that's great. Good. That's good for him. Wonderful. Great, good promotion. Good for you. So the two superintendents go off for a hunt, and Ray and Claude accompany him. Now, Ray is not so sure that Claude really knows what he's talking about. He's just like, how do you know we haven't seen this man in 40 years? It's probably not even the same guy. Like, why are you tripping? That's kind of where it sits until Sheriff Pike pulls out Ray's dad's watch. And so it's game over from that point. Things start moving kind of fast. So I'm sure you guys remember, but I'll recap it very quickly. So Hancock, took Ray's watch in a rigged poker game. Then he immediately died. Sheriff Pike killed him and got the watch. And so now this is why we got the watch. That's what happened there, if you needed the recap, which you probably did not. Ray tries to kill Pike. Claude stops Ray from killing Pike. Wilkins is trying to kill Ray because he doesn't know what's going on. Pike admits that he was like, yeah, I framed him, but who cares? They're just, black. Who cares about that? Now Claude is trying to kill Ray, and so they're fighting. Claude's trying to kill Pike, and they are fighting over the gun, him and Ray. And then Pike pulls out the gun to try to kill Ray, and then Wilkins kills Pike. So Pike is dead. We did it. Wilkins goes ahead and he pulls a full Cheney trying to explain what happened. He was just like, yeah, I thought it was a bird shot him in the face. I don't know. He died. He immediately apologizes to Ray and Claude, and he's just like, I'm so sorry that, so much of your life has been taken away. First thing in the morning, I'm going to get you guys a full pardon so we can get you out of here. I'm just sincerely sorry. But all of today's excitement has just gotten me so tired and lethargic. And, I would really like some help upstairs. And so he goes upstairs, and he never comes out because he dies. He goes upstairs and he dies. I hate this character so much. So yeah, he dies. He's dead. So no pardon for Ray and Claude. They finally get their vindication. Everyone who was around to see it is dead. Now they're just, that's it. I hate Wilkins. I hate him so much. Okay, home stretch. So we cut forward in time again, this time just slightly before present day when Willie Long is giving this story. Now, our boys, Ray and Claude, are old, they are aged, they are infirm. They're just sitting next to each other, just commiserating on the fact that they really did straight up spend their whole lives in here. They really did get life, and they served life. The only way they're gonna get out of here is to die. For some reason, while they're having this conversation, it does give Claude an idea, but before we can find out what that idea was, the infirmary catches on fire, and Ray and Claude are pronounced dead within the blaze. So Now we cut to present day. We have the two younger men and Willie Long. One of the younger men says, oh, you know, I wonder what Claude's plan was, basically. And Willie Long was just like, oh yeah, so, you know, the plan essentially is if they were to get two bodies from the nearby morgue, then they could just kind of pose them in the fire, you know, set the fire, pose them in the fire, and then escape on the fire trucks after the fire goes out. You know, they'll just kind of hang out at the bottom of the fire truck. You know, the two young men were just like, you know, well, who's to say that wouldn't have worked? And which leads Willie Long to say, who said it didn't work? So what did I notice on my rewatch about the plot that I hadn't really noticed before? Well, the first thing is that, once again, this movie is long. I would still watch it on repeat. I would still watch it on repeat in a heartbeat, but it is very long. Do you know, have you seen those memes with the villain, actual villain sort of things? I think, like, in this scenario, I think the villain was supposed to be, you know, Sheriff Pike, or maybe if you want to get, you know, a little bit more meta with it, you know, we could talk about prison industrial complexes, Jim Crow, you know, things like that. But honestly, the real villain in this story is Wilkins. Wilkins is the villain. Not enough people are talking about this. I hate that character. He sucks. He bothers me so much, and I cannot really describe why I hate him, but I do. I do indeed. Wilkins just gives me so much, you know, I'm not racist but energy. Like, he just gives me so much of this whole, like, well, you know, as long as you're not dating my daughter kind of vibe is what he gives me. I could be wrong. I'm probably not, though. I just don't think that you can get to be a superintendent of rural South Mississippi prison without a little bit of like a little splash of prejudice and racism in your background. I'm sorry, you cannot tell me otherwise. I won't believe you. You can save it. I will concede that he did the right thing in the end, but did he though? Because he died. Like, literally, at the moment of their freedom, you just decide to die. It was like the racism was so deeply embedded in him that it would rather kill him than let those innocent men free. However, Wilkins is not the only character that's in need of critique, which leads me to my third point. Number 3. Intersectionality. Biscuit is only one of several characters in this movie that gets like the late 90s comedy treatment.
Yo, Plain, what you working on? One of y'all want to help me draw my back?
Incredibly tone deaf writing for this character. Absurdly bad. And it's even worse because of how earnest it was. Biscuit is one of 2 openly LGBT characters in this movie, the other being Jangle-Leg, who is their partner. They save most of like the jokes for Jangle-Leg, but Biscuit is pretty much the femme side of that prison joke. I think the movie confuses gender and sexuality quite a bit with the character of Biscuit. During the Boom Boom Room scene, which is my favorite scene in the whole movie, Biscuit is presenting very feminine and is referred to by their partner as a woman. However, in other parts of the movie, Biscuit is referred to with he, him pronouns. I'm just gonna kind of avoid pronouns because I don't really know what the writer's intent with this was. I honestly don't even think that the writers knew what they were doing with that, if I'm being honest, which is my point with this character. There's a moment in the film where Biscuit is due to be released. This is supposed to be exciting, but it isn't, because at this point it is like the 1950s, 1960s, and Biscuit is going to be going out into the world as an openly LGBT person. So not really a great place for Biscuit to be in their situation. So what they decide to do is they take their own lives with, with cop assistance. like I said, I do think that they had an earnest attempt with this character. I feel like they were kind of trying to do something. I just don't think they had the range. They ended up falling into an incredibly dangerous trope with LGBT characters in media, which is taking their own lives or being too pure for this world and therefore not being able to handle it. It's dangerous. It's a bad precedent to put out there. And I don't really think they did a good job with the character. They did not. So that's kind of that on that. Missed the mark quite a bit with that character. Number 4, innocence and guilt. This one is a really short one, and it really is just that I almost wish that they had just kind of gave us a little bit more with the other characters at the prison. This movie, yes, it is about Ray and Claude, but a more broad theme is really the idea of innocence and guilt. And they do kind of touch on exploring that with some of the other people at the prison. Some of them are overtly guilty of the crimes they have committed, where others there's a little bit more, it's a little bit more dubious, right? We have Willie Long, for example, who has been in prison since he was 10 years old or 10 or 12 years old. So it's really unclear on whether or not he really did what he's convicted of doing, where then you have other people who's just like,
"It's my half sister, so I cut her ass in half."
So, you know, you've got people who are certainly guilty and belong in there, but then you have some others we don't know their story. And I feel like if they really wanted to explore the theme of innocence and guilt, which it seems like they really were trying to earnestly do at certain points in the movie, then they really would have done well just to explore a little bit of the personal narratives of the other folks in the prison. So I feel like it was a little bit of a missed opportunity, but not enough to really take me out of the movie itself. The next point that I'm going to touch on is it had me a little bit shakier, a little bit. Number 5, all of the isms. This is a Black comedy twice over. So it does address some pretty dark themes, but it tries to make the most out of them. Already addressed that I feel like they missed the mark with LGBT issues with Jangle Leg and Biscuit, but there are some other ones, some other marks that they missed as well. Namely the racism. Yeah, some of the white folks throw around racial slurs, and then you've got, you know, a white police officer murdering a Black man and then framing 2 other Black men and then getting away with it for 40 years. Yeah, that's racism. But I feel like these are sort of the bigger ones. These are things that are almost like tangible. They're so blatant. But there's so much that goes into the racial components that would put our characters in the situations that they're in that just flat out don't get explored, or even worse, kind of glossed over. And a really good example of that is really going back to Can't Get Right. There's a moment in the movie where Can't Get Right has a relationship with the superintendent's daughter, not Death by Plot Pox Wilkins. There's another one before him. She ends up conceiving a child who is, of course, mixed race. Because she's white. I don't know if you knew. I don't know if I made that clear. She's white. But anyway, they decide to go ahead and try to find out who the baby's father is. So, you know, he's holding the little baby up to the different inmates. And eventually, like, everyone has like a I'm Spartacus moment. They basically make fun of the situation. The superintendent and the daughter and the little baby all get, you know, right off into the sunset, never to be seen again. Why am I such a stick in the mud and don't just want a happy ending for Can't Get Right? Look, here's the thing, right? I am happy for Can't Get Right. I am happy for him. I am so glad that he did not get hurt in any way because of what happened with him and the daughter. Here's the thing that I'm going to mention, and I'm just going to mention it, just wedge it right here because it's moving me and I have to talk about it. With Can't Get Right, they make it very clear that, you know, not only is he nonverbal, but he may have some sort of developmental disability. And they don't say what it is, of course, or, you know, they don't really define it in any real way, except for the fact that he doesn't speak, and then he also has very like juvenile mannerisms. So it's really, to me, and maybe I'm reaching, but it's pretty dubious as to whether or not Can't Get Right can really give consent in this situation. We don't know, we know that he is, he has cognitive abilities, he can understand what people are saying to him, but we don't know if he has the ability to give consent to a sexual situation. I mean, that woman seemed very aware of what she wanted from Can't Get Right, and Can't Get Right, he was kind of crushing on her or whatever, but there's a difference between the two. There's a difference between having a crush on someone and being able to give consent. So it's weird to me. It feels a little racist. It feels like, well, he's, a young black man. He knows, he knows what he's supposed to be doing, but y'all have not illustrated in any way that he has the ability to take care of himself or be a self-sufficient adult. I get it, it's a character in a movie, but I'm happy that Can't Get Right made it out of that situation, but we have to really think about this logically. It's really hard for me to really be able to enjoy that scene when I have the context of another real story that happened in 1944, which was the lynching of Willie James Howard, who was a young, I believe 14-year-old boy who wrote a letter to a young white girl and was murdered for it. He was lynched because he had a crush on a young white girl. And it's like, do I want to see that in a comedy? No, of course not. But I just don't feel like they really tapped into the real and present danger that a lot of these inmates had, that they were facing. Can't Get Right could have died. And I don't feel like that was really encapsulated, probably because it isn't funny. But I mean, come on, like, you can't really make the attempt to address these themes if you're going to make everything a joke, which is the point of having the dark comedy aspect of it. But I don't know. It was weird. It made me a little uncomfortable. The whole situation with Can't Get Right and like having a child was weird to me, especially because they make some sort of joke about him needing to have people, like a support system for him to kind of get through his day-to-day activities. So I don't know. It was weird. Overall, that whole scene felt a little tone deaf. They definitely missed the mark with the racism, felt a little ableist there as well. Of course, I already touched on the LGBT issues. So all the isms, I felt like they really, like, you can make it funny, but then also make it, a little bit more conscious and like purposeful, but they didn't do that. So so my final thoughts on the movie. I brought up some pretty serious critiques. So does that, upon a rewatch, really take away from my overall enjoyment of the movie? Not really. I would say that it contextualized it. I think it's fair to enjoy a movie just to enjoy it. It is a funny movie. It is hilarious. It has the late great Bernie Mac in it. Also, it has Anthony Anderson in his first movie debut. It's just a lot of genuinely hilarious people. Martin Lawrence and Eddie Murphy are headlining this movie, and they are fantastic together. Oh my God, they're so funny. Overall, it's a really great movie. It's very funny. You would enjoy it if you watched it. If you have watched it but haven't seen it in a while, rewatch it, and you'll still enjoy it, because I still did. I think it's still important to call these things out. I think that they're still fair critiques. That's okay. It's still an interesting, original movie that really attempted to tackle really huge subjects like racism, like incarceration, in the middle of the war on drugs and within the narrative during Jim Crow South and Prohibition. And so it deserves its flowers for that. I really want to know your thoughts. Critically, the movie has very mixed reviews. Tell me what you think. Let me know in the comments. Am I reaching? Is there something that I missed that you caught? Am I a, overly sensitive millennial crybaby? Maybe. Let me know in the comments. I'm sure you will. So that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for bearing with me for the very first episode. There's so many things that I want to try, so many topics that I want to cover. If you have any suggestions for anything you would like to hear me talk about, you can follow me on my social medias and DM me there. That's at Fabulous Creative. I'm gonna put it in the description. So that's all that I have. I don't have a sign off yet, so I'm just gonna tell you guys, I'll see you in the next video. See you later.